Bleach Revisited. I am Karker Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be talking about how the chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are discussing for the episode. This is Chapter 95, Crush. What a surprise! You even remember my name. Excellent. Thanks. Who is that guy? He's different from the others. His spiritual pressure's much stronger. That's Renji Abarai, assistant captain of the 6th Company. Assistant captain? I must admit, I'm surprised. I was sure that Captain Kuchiki had killed you. Hey! Wait, Ichigo! I don't know how you survived, but my compliments. But it ends here. Didn't I tell you that I'd kill the one who took Rukia's powers? As long as you live, she can't get her powers back. What do you care? You're ready to kill her just to bring her back here. You're gonna let me pass, or you're gonna have to kill me. Come, we'll let strength decide, eh? Bleach, Chapter 95, Crush. Whoa. Is Ichigo nuts? What is he thinking? He's fighting an assistant captain. I know he's strong, but there's no way he can win. No. Maybe he can. Look closely at Ichigo. Incredible. He's overwhelming Assistant Captain Renji Abarai. What exactly is Ichigo? How should I know? I'd like to know that myself. Hey, Ichigo Kurosaki, tell me, how do you intend to save Rukia? How? Even if you beat me, there are 11 more assistant captains, and 13 captains for you to deal with. If you want to save Rukia, you'll have to defeat us all. Do you really think that you could do that? I have to. Captains, assistant captains, it doesn't matter. I'll crush you all. Anybody that gets in my way is going down. What? Where does this bravado come from? You may have escaped death a few times, but don't delude yourself. Your Zenpakuto changed? I hope you don't think that made you stronger. Howl! Zebimaru! I can't counter it. Ah! Ichigo! Ichigo! Ah! So, you thought you knew me because we fought before, eh? But I'll let you in on a little secret for your own good. When Soul Reapers of a rank of assistant captain or higher go to the world of the living, in order to avoid influencing the mortals unduly, our powers are suppressed. I'm 5 times more powerful than I was then. No matter how much stronger you've gotten, there's no way you could defeat me. Oh, so then this is your real strength. Well, it's not enough, not even close. But thanks for the FYI, if the other assistant captains are like you, then I just may have a chance. Fool. Brand new. Yeah, it looks like it's hard to see through. That is it for Chapter 95, Crush. And we will get back to the beginning of the chapter and we'll talk about it in a little bit more depth. These last couple of videos, I've had, a couple more things to say than maybe what I put on the video. There's a few things that, I could talk about certain characters' designs, even though we haven't really seen the characters in full. And yeah, I think for the sake of concision, I will continue to kind of leave more minor things to the side if I can. But I do what I can. And if there's ever anything that you think that I haven't addressed or that you'd like a little bit more insight on or to talk about, just always bring it up in the comments. It's a good heads up for that. But yeah, let's get into this chapter. Let's talk about what's going on here. So as we had before, Renji is coming down the steps. He's going to go and confront Ichigo. In a lot of ways, because Renji has this personal connection to everything, right? He's connected to Rukia. He's got that sort of that whole connection towards knowing that there's maybe a conspiracy going on, and he's fought Ichigo in the past, so he's really trying to suss out what's going on here. Other kind of cool thing is that he is coming down the stairs, so yet again we have that sort of situation where Ichigo is constantly sort of ascending towards towards Rukia or towards the heavens, right? As the Shinigami come down to deal with him, right? They descend upon him. And whenever that imagery was used in the case of Rukia, it was Rukia kind of coming down from this holier than thou sort of position and coming down to meet Ichigo at his level in the human world, right? And so here, Renji's sort of doing that as well. He's trying to understand Ichigo. He's trying to kind of maybe even relate to him in some way. But they have to fight. They're guys. They're on opposite sides, so on and so forth. So they don't end up collaborating, but instead there's still a greater understanding of each other that they're trying to get. And for Renji, that means sort of shirking a little bit of his pride as a Shinigami and becoming a little more human, whereas Ichigo needs to ascend to gain these Shinigami techniques to like reach these sort of elevated places in order to contend with the people that are there and to rescue his friend, right? So Ichigo is constantly striding upward and onward, while these others are coming down and becoming more human, descending this metaphorical staircase towards him. So I like that the imagery gets used again here, because we had it used in relation to Rukia, and it's neat to see it here as well. I'm not going to say every staircase in Bleach is that way, but hey, I certainly see a little bit of a parallel. And I like the little back and forth that we get here. Kind of very cool facial expressions. Of course, Hanataro absolutely is terrified of Renji. And he would have known about Renji too, because, of course, he was cleaning the Squad 6 barracks, right? So he knows that Renji is a very powerful guy. And Renji also used to be in the 11th Squad, right? So he was 5th, 11th, and then eventually 6th, I believe. So, Renji's somebody that has kind of really quickly risen through the ranks and is probably known as a kind of brutal fighter. But, yeah, quickly has become the assistant captain or the lieutenant of the 6th Squad, right? Of course, this freaks Ganju out, because Ganju, they've been having so much difficulty with, like 3rd and 5th seats, right? So he's really worried that they're finally up against an opponent they can't defeat, right? Now, interestingly enough, Renji speaks towards this idea that he thinks that Baikyu had killed Ichigo, right? Whereas Kisuke speaks towards the fact that Baikyu had actually just severed his connection to spiritual powers. The idea being that perhaps Rukia would regain her powers if Ichigo didn't have that connection to them. And so Renji brings up this kind of alternate point where he says, well, Rukia will never be able to get her powers back so long as you have them, right? But we know that Ichigo doesn't have them anymore. We know that those have been completely severed from him entirely. And that's something that maybe Renji's not privy to. So really here, it's kind of interesting. We have information Renji doesn't have, but he kind of speaks absolutely, and we get a little bit of why he thinks that he has to kill Ichigo. But because for Rukia to continue to live as a Soul Reaper and to continue to enjoy her kind of elevated social status, the thing that both of them worked on throughout their youth, they both came from the Rukon guy, right? Then it's significant, it's important to him that Ichigo then dies, of course. But this is a conflict because, of course, Ichigo's trying to save her as well. Yeah. So I do like that they draw blades, they fight, and this is a kind of neat little skirmish here. I like that we get Ichigo kind of coming in again, right to left. We have the arrangement of these characters. It's pretty exciting. This big clash, of course. Pretty cool chapter cover. The extended hand towards you thing is something that what should I call it? We'll see again for sure, but is something that Kubo originally sort of did in his previous manga, Zombie Powder, and as one of the volume covers, I believe, with the character Gamma. And so this is perhaps in reference to that. Certainly, there are parallels between Ichigo and that character. So I do recommend it. And at one point in this channel, I'm going to end up reading all of Zombie Powder as like a little side series. I'm going to eventually, try to have like the rest of Kubo's work because they're all kind of short in comparison. I mean, they're one shots or just a few volumes. Zombie Powder is only 3 volumes, and so I think it would be interesting to present all of that, just so that we could talk about it, and especially talking about it in relation to Bleach, I think is the kind of context I want to put it in. But this is certainly evocative of that. It's also evocative of some of the earlier sort of stylizations that we got for Ichigo, the sort of punk aesthetic that he has. And I also just think that it's like pretty stylish and strong. Really shows off Ichigo as coming right at you, right? So yeah, we get this clattering of blades, this circle of smoke. The two of the characters clash again and again. And yeah, interestingly enough, we get this insight that like, well, Ichigo's actually holding his own, right? He pushes Renji all the way back to this mountain, and they have this interaction. I love this face of like surprise or shock even from Hanatara, right? As Hanatara and Ganju kind of sit back because they both know they're sort of out of their league here. The statement of like what exactly is Ichigo is pretty significant because if we think he's quickly grown in power, right? And we know that Ichigo sort of there's a significance to him, in that he was trained by Urahara, in that he's awakened to this kind of power. Notably, Ichigo seems to be permanently in his like Shikai state, right? That is sort of in this released kind of powered state. At the very least, that seems to be the case. And so, Ichigo certainly is an outlier, and the rapid kind of strength gain that he's getting seems to throw Ganju even off, because Ganju is like, wait a minute, like you were struggling with like this third seat guy, right? Like what is going on? And here Ganju is starting to realize like Ichigo is much stronger than he maybe anticipated. So yeah, it's a neat moment. It also invites us to think about like, yeah, wait, what is the deal with Ichigo? Why is he breaking all these rules, and for what reasons? And we can certainly probably think of a few. I mean, I already proposed a few ideas there, but nevertheless, we've always known Ichigo to have this kind of overflowing Reiatsu. His spiritual power is just kind of tremendous. So it just makes sense, right? I mean, he is the protagonist, but there are, of course, reasons for that, and we will come to find them out down the line. But yeah, we get this sort of, and this is something that is kind of interesting, is we finally have a fight, and this doesn't happen a ton in Bleach early on, but starts to happen now, where we have onlookers to really comment on the fight, right? And so they kind of guide where you would, as a reader, maybe have these certain questions that you might not have otherwise. Like if you just saw them clash, you might not have other people to really contextualize, like, oh man, Ichigo shouldn't be doing this well, like what is this dude? So there's all of that. I do like that Renji doesn't look that bothered here, as he's sort of just trying to ask and figure out, what Ichigo's plan even is here. And I love that he's like, look, you'd have to go through like me and all the other lieutenants, and then all the other captains, and they're even stronger than me. So like, what are you even gonna do? And I love that this is really maybe Renji speaking for himself, that the reason why Renji hasn't saved Rukia is because, well, he'd have to contend with all the other lieutenants and all the other captains that are stronger than him. And Ichigo, he completely ignores that. He's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll crush anyone that gets in my way. And so, like, that doesn't really end up being a satisfying answer for Renji, of course, because it's like, where do you get that from? Which he says that immediately. But you could tell, like, in his expression here, that this isn't what he was expecting, right? Um, that he considers it to be a delusion. That he's going to prove to Ichigo that Ichigo can't really do this, and really it's because Renji wants to prove to himself that he can't do it, right? That Renji in this moment is resigned to the sort of fate that's going to happen. Even though he knows that this is unjust and unfair, and that someone he cares about is going to die, be executed, he's under the impression, like, what can he do, right? And he's pretty much convinced himself, like, there's no reason to fight because that's delusional. Like, you can't overcome this system. Whereas Ichigo, even though he might not have the might to do so, is still standing up for what he believes in. And so Renji has to have this fight, because if Renji, wins, then he can feel justified. He can be like, look, you can't. Like, it's just the state of things. People are going to be stronger than you. But if he doesn't, if he loses, then perhaps Ichigo is right. Maybe that'll change his mind on things. Maybe Ichigo really can do this. And that's what Renji would like to believe. So already from the beginning here, like, Renji is sort of, like, in his heart hoping that he loses, Mentally, it's sort of a cope that he's like, yeah, if I win, then it proves that I can't save Rukia, which is a bit dismal, but it's the sort of reality that he's convinced himself is the case. Of course, really cool, kind of swatting Ichigo back here. Again, if we talk about, like, left-right momentum, I like that this is like a moment of Renji reversing that momentum of shooting Ichigo from the left side of the page to the right, and then we get Ichigo kind of falling back on the right, and as we go left, we get Renji reasserting himself and then coming at us, and now he's full front center, and he commands the action, which I think is really cool. Yet again, we get that sort of Renji coming from the left side of the page to shunt Ichigo to the right, and I mean, like, here we do get to see a little bit more of Zabimaru, Ichigo actually blocking it as it, like, rattles out towards him, and him realizing, like, he's not going to be able to counter the sure, like, force of this as he's knocked into the wall. Of course, this leads into, like, another little reveal, which this is one that people, I think, have mixed feelings on, and I can understand a little bit why, but nevertheless, I do love the shot of Renji pulling back the forced perspective on Zabimaru here as he chucks it back into the just being the sword without the whippy kind of segments. But the idea that whenever a lieutenant or higher goes to the role of the living, they suppress their powers, fivefold, right? So they only exhibit 20% of their strength, so they don't influence things too much, right? Otherwise, it could cause untold calamity, right? Their spiritual power or whatever, which I guess makes sense. But it's the sort of thing where it's like, I guess they also don't go to the world of the living very often. You instead have characters that are a little bit lower rank, like Rukia, on these sort of missions to fight Hollows, right? So, yeah, this is just kind of a convenient way for Renji to have a power-up. I mean, it makes sense in world as a mechanic, if there really is this kind of idea of preserving or not wanting to kind of intrude upon the human world too much, then it makes sense that there's, like, some sort of sense of dampening or responsibility of use of one's power. It's not incredibly satisfying, but it's there. It's worth noting. Nevertheless, once again, Renji has this notion of, like, oh, well, you can't defeat me, right? Because he's thinking in terms of power levels, and once you've done that, you've gone off the boat. You've lost. Of course, Ichigo defiant. comes back to insist that, like, oh, well, if everybody's just on your level, I'm not going to have any problem. Which is good stuff. It's good. Cool Ichigo moment. This ending on Renji just having this sinister face and calling him a fool isn't exactly where I'd want to end the chapter. It's not like I would like a little bit more of a gripping or dynamic exchange, but that's what we get. We also get a little in between where we get this focus on Renji's goggles. All in all, I think this chapter, while it does start to introduce this conflict with Renji, and it does do a lot of really interesting like kind of character things. It does a little bit of world building in terms of the like way in which they suppress their powers, things like that. There's not a lot else going on, and I do feel like it maybe lacks a little bit of the oomph in this final moment that could really make this like feel as much of a showdown as it truly is. I mean, this is essentially like, even though Ichigo sort of won that fight before, this is a rematch that's like a true kind of fight between the two of them. Uh, Rather than Renji sort of getting blindsided, so they can actually engage with one another fully and seriously. But I think that the other big thing here is that we just get mostly the ideologies that are on display, and like I think I like maybe this moment between the two of them. Renji sort of looking down on Ichigo as Ichigo violently struggles against him. I think it's a little bit more telling. Um, I love also Ichigo's face, like side by side with Zangetsu, as like it is essentially his edge that he is bearing, right? It's good stuff, but yeah, this insistence on like he's gonna carve his way through, right? That he doesn't care, that he doesn't. Even if someone's stronger than him, it doesn't matter. He has no other choice but to rage against this machine. Whereas again, Renji really has convinced himself that that's impossible. It's an impossibility. And maybe that might be something that's kind of put on him by his awareness of the Soul Society, whereas Ichigo's maybe a bit naive. But nevertheless, this is as much a battle of ideologies as it is individuals, right? And because it's a shonen manga, we of course know Ichigo's going to win, because the takeaway lesson can't possibly be just give up. People are stronger than you. So any amount of genre awareness will tell you that Renji's probably not going to come out of this one with a win, but we have yet to see how it kind of plays out. Nevertheless, all in all, I think that the line work is pretty sharp here. There are places where it is a little messy, especially in some of this cheek shading where you can see that the lines go past or don't quite align perfectly, but that's fine. I kind of like there's a sketchiness to Bleach that I appreciate that isn't like 100% clean and professional. That reminds me that a human being drew this, and I do like that. I like the feeling of that art as created. Um, yeah, all in all, it's a solid chapter. I really can't begrudge it too much. I do wish there was a little bit more there, especially like a stronger end point. But we do get some fantastic Renji expressions. We do get a little bit of an exciting clash. There's some interesting choreography. I mean, it's essentially them clashing swords 2 or 3 times, and then Ichigo pushing him up to the wall, and then Renji knocking Ichigo back, and then hitting him with the Zabimaru release and knocking Ichigo into a wall. So we get this very dynamic sort of back and forth power as they both try to flex upon each other. Though you have to ask, like, how is Ichigo going to win this if Renji is pulled out this sort of power to usurp Ichigo? It's like, well, how's Ichigo going to handle Zabimaru? And perhaps Ganju will actually help. Who knows? Maybe he'll actually assist, or maybe he'll just sit on the sidelines like a typical shonen side character. Honestly, I don't blame Genju for getting involved, at least in this chapter, because this is such an intensely personal battle between Ichigo and Renji. And we've already had that sort of ideology that's been espoused to us of like not getting involved in a person's battles, like battles for pride or battles for one's life, that kind of thing. But the other big thing is I think Ganju fears for his life. So he's really worried that perhaps if he gets involved, Renji will just kill him. Which is fair. Fair take, Genju. You know, you're already kind of blooded from the previous battle, so I don't blame you. But yeah, that's all I got to say for this one. Not a ton, but if there's anything that you notice that you want to talk about in either the art or the narrative, please let me know. And I'd like to know your takes on this chapter, how you feel about it. But without any more to talk about there, let's move on to talking about how this connects to the rest of the series. Let's talk about the spoilers. And so, of course, immediately, I do like, I love Renji bringing up, like, Ichigo remembering his name, because Renji surely can't fucking remember anyone's names. But it also speaks towards, Renji being a significant kind of adversary for Ichigo. And I guess it's not so much spoilers, but it does hint to us that Renji is going to be a significant character moving forward, if we didn't know that already, obviously. Of course, we've got, let's see, got you being useless. Yeah. Oh boy. Excuse me for that. I'm trying to get to what I had to really say about them, because they do have a few things that I do believe they connect upwards. I mean, the first deal being, of course, Ichigo being in this unwinnable battle, and being able to actually push the battle forward, which is it's typical for Ichigo, but to like initially overwhelm an opponent, and then the opponent pulls out some ability, and then Ichigo gets pushed back, and then Ichigo has to figure out a way to kind of deal with that ability. This moment of what exactly is Ichigo is pretty early for kind of highlighting the fact that Ichigo isn't like a Shinigami or a regular human, that there is, of course, something significant to his existence, right? And as we know, like, he's a hybrid, right? He's got, at this point, latent full-bring powers, but at the very least he has both Quincy and Shinigami and hollow powers to an extent. Maybe not all on full control or display, but he's certainly got a multitude of powers, and that like capability not just comes from his his sort of lineage or whatever, the sort of being he's been designed to be by these two scientists, both Kisuke and Aizen. But furthermore, I think it speaks towards, again, this idea of like having this very strong willpower in the face of odds, and then being able to actualize that willpower is something that the Hogekyo does. And I always have read Ichigo's rapid ascent in power to be kind of a manifestation of the Hogekyo's will. That he's able to achieve the power that he seeks because it's within his natural means, because he is this sort of ascended being to an extent. I know that's kind of, more headcanon than hard confirmed, but it's always something that I've sort of felt to be the case, because it does neatly explain within the narrative like why Ichigo fulfills this deep desire to constantly overcome the next opponent, but just barely, right, and not to kill them. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm only yawning tonight. Just got put me to sleep here, Renji. But yeah, I'm trying to think of some other kind of moments that connect here. Of course, we know that Ichigo does find a way to counter Zabumaru. Of course, this moment of like, hey, we reduce our powers and then we upgrade, we have them under lock or whatever whenever we go in the mortal world. That is something that of course comes up again later whenever the Fraction invade Karakura Town, right? Grimjow and his friends, and they're fought back by the Shinigami. I believe that's the case. Because I remember, maybe it's even later, but I do remember that being like a big thing. The Shinigami all then take off their power suppressant sort of tattoos or whatever the case may be. That they remove those limiters and they're able to fight at their full strength and overcome the enemies. Which I feel like a lot of people maybe don't appreciate that moment that much because it does feel sort of like, oh yeah, but we were secretly stronger all along, haha. Which, I think Renji's setting that up. It's okay. It doesn't make it great because, like, for me, I really wish, if you're going to introduce this sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, we have to limit our powers, and you're going to use it as a way to sort of power your characters up so they can have more dynamic and interesting kind of conflicts and essentially have another power up. Then, like, show the characters having to work within the limitations of that too, right? I think that's a smarter way of doing it. So those characters struggling because they're trying to uphold the kind of law of like, hey, we can't influence the mortal realm unduly. We have to keep our powers suppressed, even though they're fighting enemies that aren't suppressing themselves, right? That would be interesting. Of course, yeah, that Ichigo's gonna win. He's gonna whoop up on Renji, but we knew that. Yeah, I don't know that I have much else to say about this one, honestly. There's not a ton of connections that I can really draw. If there are some that you can think of, if there are some larger sort of parallels, I mean, Renji going up against Ichigo certainly does strike me as the sort of like, okay, well, the rival's going to fight you and you're going to win him over sort of fight. Because Renji does end up joining, of course, Ichigo's side. So, like, I can certainly see, like, a sort of parallel to, Ichigo versus Grimmjow down the line. But that said, like, I think, and that's certainly intentional on Kubo's part. The relationship that Ichigo ends up having with Grimmjow is, like, fundamentally different, than the one that Renji has with Ichigo, where Renji very much is like, while like Ichigo and Grimmjow kind of are both pursuing power in their own means and like the power to live freely, essentially. Ichigo and Renji both are just trying to like sort of save someone that they care about, but Renji is constantly reminded of like his failures or his insignificance as far as like he does not have the power, and so here he's convinced that he does not have enough significant power to do this, so he's going to be resigned. And Ichigo sort of showing him that like, well, you don't have to have that resignation, even if you don't have the power, because even if it's hopeless, fight for what you believe in, and that's what makes it like have some hope that you're willing to die for it. So I don't know. I think this fight certainly has an impact on Renji. It's what directly leads Renji to confronting Byakuya later, because Renji's finally like, okay, well, I'm going to still take them on. I'm still going to fight for what I believe in, even if it's against somebody that's stronger than I am. Which, cool stuff. Cool stuff. But yeah, if you have anything to say about this, if there's any sort of connections that you want to draw to later parts of the manga, feel free to make a comment. Let me know. But that's all for this one, folks. As usual, please do give the video a like if you managed to watch through it this far. This is one of the shorter ones, but I still do appreciate it. It's still over half an hour, so it's a non-zero amount of your time, and so I like that you're willing to give that time to consider Bleach and consider the content that I am putting out. And if you can show some appreciation for that, then, well, I think that would go a long way for me. And it certainly would help the channel out. If you want to help the channel in another way, one of the things that you can do is to support me on Patreon. Right now on the screen, you're seeing everybody who is a current supporting member of the Patreon. And I want to send a huge shout out and thanks to those folks. You really do help it. And without you, I don't know, I probably wouldn't put out these videos near as frequently or feel as driven to do so. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, with all that said, with our formalities taken care of and our thanks said and our reading done, that'll draw this episode to a close, folks. This has been Karakura Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.